Okay, and we're live. Good evening, everybody. All right, we'll just wait a couple minutes. I'm going to do a discussion. Actually, I'm going to play a podcast. It's about, I think this one is about, let me see if I can, on the covert narcissist, which will explain to you there are different types of narcissism. And what I'll do is I'll tell you a little bit about covert narcissism, and then we'll get right into the podcast. Now, there's a lot of online podcasts that cover narcissism that are great. You can sign up for their emails. Um, you can even sign up for group sessions. Um, and they encourage you to share their podcasts as well. So, in case anyone is really interested in if you know someone who's in a relationship that they suspect their partner or their friend is narcissistic and abusive, certainly give them a heads up. And when the live is over, I'll put all that stuff in the description. Hey, your main girl, Jenny, Jackie, welcome everyone. Can you hear me okay? Kimberly, Prickly Pear, thank you. Yes, showing love and support. I appreciate that. Okay. So to start off, so covert, the opposite of covert is overt, overt, narcissism. So overt is someone who is very outwardly shows um, narcissistic traits, whereas a covert, which is one of the most dangerous types of narcissism, is because they don't show it at first. Okay. So after they've got you, so to say, then their mask falls off. Okay. So I'm not going to be reading chat for a second. Okay. So covert narcissism is they tend to be more introverted. Okay. And again, you can identify a overt narcissist because they can be loud, arrogant. They show right away that they're insensitive to your needs, um, and always are looking for compliments. So that's an overt narcissist. Okay, and they can easily be observed by others. Um, so the signs, let's see, signs of a covert narcissist. Okay, let's get to that. Give me 1 second. Okay, covert narcissists may have the following traits. They are shy and socially withdrawn, highly sensitive to criticism. They have grandiose fantasies, exhibit passive aggressive behavior, arrogance, or subtle superiority. They are envious of others, believe they deserve what others have, do not have empathy for anyone, natural tendency to hold grudges, and seem to have anxiety or depression. And so let's go over some of those. So, for example, the extreme sensitivity to criticism is typical of narcissistic personality disorder. But in a covert narcissist, this manifests as extreme sensitivity to criticism, and that's not unique to narcissistic personality disorder, since few people enjoy being criticized. None of us like that, right? However, the way someone responds to both real and perceived criticism can shed light on whether this sensitivity is extreme. So someone that's a covert narcissist might act as if they are above the criticism. Internally, however, they may feel empty, humiliated, or angry, and their dismissive, sarcastic remarks are an attempt at hiding these feelings. They can be passive aggressive um, in order to convey their frustration or make themselves look superior. So remember, a narcissist's goal, right, is to feel superior and make you feel inferior. Okay, so their passive aggressive behavior may be sabotaging other people's works or their relationships with other people, mocking others, giving others the silent treatment, making others feel bad, procrastinating on tasks they think are beneath them. Hi, everyone. Hey, Scott. I see everyone coming in. Um, and they have a tendency to put themselves down. So they crave admiration and rely on others to build their self esteem. Covert narcissist, that's what narcissistic personality disorder. Covert narcissists are no different, but instead of boasting about themselves, they tend to put themselves down with an underlying goal of earning compliments. They can be shy or withdrawn, um, and are deeply insecure and afraid of other people seeing their failures. So often they may avoid situations or relationships that lack clear benefits. Grandiose fantasies, um, they spend more time thinking about their abilities and achievements than talking about them. They may have an I'll show you attitude and often withdraw into a fantasy world of unlimited success or brilliance where they, again, are superior to others. And we did mention that they do have a covert narcissists have a higher risk of depression and anxiety than any other types of narcissists because of their deep fear of failure and frustration, um, and also with their struggle of feeling empty or even suicidal, self harm. Covert narcissists hold grudges for a very long time. If they feel they are being treated unfairly, they may say nothing at the moment but wait to take revenge in some way, along with a desire for revenge. These grudges can lead to feelings of bitterness and resentment. And they often are very envious. They may not openly discuss their feelings of envy, but they may show bitterness and resentment over not getting what they want. Um, they feel inadequate when they can't meet their own high standards. This can result in feelings of shame, anger, or powerlessness. And fake empathy, covert narcissists have the ability to seem empathetic and compassionate, but it's usually self serving and just for show. They may try to be helpful or generous, but with the goal of winning approval and admiration. So there you go. Welcome, everybody. Heavens to Betsy, hello. Voices in your head. If I missed anyone. Lori, Elizabeth. Critique doesn't bother me anymore. I embrace it. That's hard. I think we all are a little sensitive to criticism, even constructive. I know I am. I am. I don't always show it, but I'll beat myself up internally. You know, I'm not good enough. Even constructive criticism. Um, More so, not in my personal life, but I think at work. I think at work. Yes, Paisley, thank you. Yes, I did. I meant to mention that as well. Yes, I did see your email. Thank you. I just haven't had time to respond to everyone. Okay, so um okay, so this gentleman is sponsoring this podcast. Um, and his name is John Offord, which he's a producer of radio, and he has a couple of guests on. He's an author, so I'm going to let you listen to it. I'm going to be in chat, um, and I can pause anytime if anyone has any questions. And I too, I am no ways an expert. I am learning a lot too as we go along, and I think there's a lot of frustration, and I think it's best that instead of thinking we can change the narcissist because we cannot, that we better understand narcissistic personality disorder. And covert falls under that. So, and that's just one. I mean, there's the malignant narcissist, there's the covert, there's many different types under narcissistic personality disorder. So, um, and if anyone wants to take a link, if they have anything to offer or want to share something, um, feel free. I just ask that in the green room you do show your face, just in the green room, so we don't get trolls. Hey, Rabbit Dog, Sour Milk, hi. Thanks, everyone. Denise, Debbie, thanks for coming. Okay, so let's start playing this. Let me know if you can hear it okay as well.
So, hello everybody, I'm John Offord. I'm a broadcaster based in the UK.
I'm just going to play the audio, okay? There's really nothing to share. It's a podcast, so.
And today we're going to talk about covert narcissism. I'm delighted to be joined by two very special guests online from the US of A. Debbie Mirza is the author of The Covert Passive-Aggressive Narcissist, Recognizing the Traits and Finding Healing After Hidden Emotional and Psychological Abuse, and also the book The Safest Place Possible. Debbie also works as a restorative coach and works with people who have been in relationships with covert narcissists. I'm also delighted to be joined by Dr. Robin Rise, a clinical psychologist with over 30 years experience working with individuals on achieving life happiness, with a speciality with people recovering from narcissistic abuse. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. So Robin, I'm going to get straight to the point and start with you and just ask you, what is narcissism?
Interesting, right? We hear so much about narcissism in today's world. And really there's a healthy narcissism that people have to understand exists, as well as an unhealthy narcissism. So healthy narcissism is the possession of a realistic self-esteem, having access to your own emotional life and your ability to move forward and adapt and be flexible. So it's not unhealthy to have a sense of narcissism about yourself. We only have our own personal perspective. But unhealthy narcissism.
Okay, so right then and there, which we hear often, we all have a little bit of narcissism in us. We do. It's a matter of using it in a healthy way as opposed to the unhealthy way, which describes for example, a covert narcissist. So we all have narcissism in us, but it's how we apply that to our lives and to others in our lives.
Is a need to feel overly special and overly stealing attention from everything around you. So I think what we're talking about here is what's the difference between healthy and unhealthy narcissism and what we see in those around us and perhaps in ourselves.
Thank you. So in that, my second question then, this is one for Debbie. So what is covert narcissism?
Yeah, so covert narcissism, and I think it'll be really helpful when we list, because there's narcissism, the word narcissism and the definition like Robin was talking about, and then there's narcissistic personality disorder. And so I know we'll talk about the different traits of that in this podcast. Yeah. And then covert narcissism is essentially exactly the same traits, but the way they display these, the way these manifest are in a very subtle, covert, insidious way that you don't notice. So this can be a person who's a humanitarian, or a person who's just super nice, or a leader in a church, or a guru, or someone you wouldn't think, oh, this person is really arrogant and selfish. But they do the same things as far as controlling, manipulating, devaluing a person, just as an overt narcissist does with all the traits for narcissistic personality disorder. But they do it in a way where you don't notice. So you can often be with someone like this for quite a while before recognizing these traits in them.
Interesting. So it's obviously very subtle, and I should say at this point that I feel like I've had experience of a covert narcissist in a past relationship, so I find this fascinating. But I just want to maybe throw this one back to Robin and say, has covert narcissism been around for ages? Are people just waking up to it, or is it something new?
That's a fascinating question, because covert narcissism is something that we experience sort of internally. You kind of feel it, but no one speaks about it. So there is not a whole lot of research out there or information out there about how far back concepts of covert narcissism go. We can talk about it in terms of an antisocial personality disorder, so the people that are bigger than life and do things like Debbie was saying, from a humanitarian perspective, but it tends to be only for their own gain or their own adulation and admiration. So great question. Debbie, what do you think?
I've thought about this too. Recently, I've had the thought, just kind of observing life and history, and my own opinion, like you said, there's really no data where we can look back and this is how many. But in my own thinking, I feel like it's on the rise. I don't know how long it's been around, but looking back through history, I feel like manipulation and control seems more covert to me now than it did before. And I've thought about this and thought, I think, why is that? And I feel like humanity overall is getting smarter and wiser. And we have the internet now, and we have ways of finding out information we didn't have before. So I think, on a larger scale of covert manipulation, I think those who are wanting to manipulate and control have to do it in a more covert way now than they could have before.
That's interesting, right? So basically she's saying, because narcissism, the topic, is being more spoken of, it's more information is readily available on the internet, that like the overt narcissist, the one that's easily recognized, often has to hide a little bit, like the covert narcissist, so they aren't recognized right away, because more and more people are starting to become educated about narcissism. So that was an excellent point.
That's just a thought I've had recently. Yeah. And so we experience covert manipulation all over without realizing it, just in the way of, what's broadcasted to us, and advertisements and different things giving us, really devaluing who we are. You'll be more beautiful if you take this product, or you'll be, smarter if you'll do this, and giving us all the impression that we're not good enough exactly how we are, which is like a fractalized, version of this, in a smaller version in our interpersonal relationships, but then on a larger version of how we're manipulated and controlled in a covert way in other ways.
Debbie, you mentioned earlier about narcissistic personality disorder, sometimes referred to as NPD. Maybe throw this one to you, Robin. Can you just tell us what that is then? So what's the difference between a narcissist or someone that has narcissistic personality disorder?
Yeah, so from a clinical perspective, there's categories in what's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that psychologists, psychiatrists use to actually classify people. So the person, to be diagnosed with a personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, you have to meet these 5 of these 9 criteria, and I'm just going to read them if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
So 5 of these 9, 1 is a grandiose sense of self-importance. 2, a preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. 3, a belief that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people or institutions. 4, a need for excessive admiration. 5, a sense of entitlement. 6, interpersonally exploitative behavior. 7, a lack of empathy, an unwillingness to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. 8, envy of others, or a belief that others are envious of him or her. And 9 is a demonstration of arrogant or haughty behaviors and attitudes.
So you said that you need, is it 5 of those criteria to be diagnosed with MPD? Is that correct, Robin?
That's true. That's true. For a clinical diagnosis, it needs to be that. But
Well, that being said, I think I know more narcissist coverts than I thought I did at the beginning. When you think, did anyone else go through the list and think of somebody or the people in your life that you feel may be covert? I sure did, and I just thought of a few more people. It's like, wow.
personality disorders tend to move on a more fluid scale. So you can experience a lot of those feelings and traits from people without needing to have a diagnosis, an official diagnosis.
We'll move on to this later, but I guess often a lot of people go undiagnosed, don't they? I guess obviously you have to be willing to be diagnosed in the first place. So it's interesting, isn't it? That I guess I just wondered how aware people were these days of MPD. Do you think it's something that's becoming more and more kind of out there in society? People are aware of this disorder now, more so than maybe 5-10 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's part of why Debbie's book is so brilliant.
Yeah.
Because she really exposes some of the more underground traits of narcissists, or how, like she said, over history, that it's kind of gone from an overt, obvious person looking in the mirror all the time, the arrogance, to it being much, much more subtle. And what I tell my clients often is it's important, we're not needing to diagnose somebody to feel and trust that we are experiencing the manipulation and abuse from narcissism and covert narcissism. So absolutely, I believe we're seeing the nuanced pictures of what narcissism is and what it does to people, both individually and I actually think culturally and systemically.
Yeah, absolutely. Debbie, if we can just talk about your book for a little while. I wonder what the reaction was like from your book. I mean, obviously this is high up there on Amazon's bestsellers, and I know that you have a Facebook group, which is kind of an international thing now. Just tell us about some of the reaction that you've had.
It's been incredible. When I wrote the book, I underestimated how many people across the world in so many different countries are experiencing the same thing. For me, I had gone through a very long relationship with someone who I had no idea had these traits until we were going through a divorce. And my attorney said to me, is this person narcissist? And I was like, no, that's the last term I'd use to describe this person. They're so nice. And that's what launched me into my own discovery. And when I went to, she said, I suggest you get a hold of as much information on this as you can, because you need to know what you're dealing with. And I was so shocked. I could tell she looked at me with these glaring eyes. I was just a deer caught in headlights. And so I did. I just started devouring books on narcissism. And at first I thought, I don't know if this is the right direction, because, like Robin was reading, shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. Like, well, I don't really see that. Doesn't show empathy. No, they seemed, like they cared and they showed empathy. But as I got to, there was enough information about narcissism that I read, like there's this hidden rage that you feel, you know, and I thought, yeah, that's true. And I started to see, you know, some control. And then after talking, I actually went to like different therapists. I just full on, it was like, this was my full-time job to figure out what was going on, because things had gotten so confusing. And I finally talked to a life coach that said, it sounds like you're dealing with a covert passive aggressive narcissist, and they're the most difficult to recognize. And my whole body felt that when I heard those words. It was like the peace I needed. So then I started Googling, you know, searching those words, and there was no book written on it. So I kind of pieced together, you know, information I got from YouTube and articles and books, and then saw how.
So was this the first book ever written then on covert narcissism?
As far as I know, there was no book available. Yeah. And I didn't, and I started seeing things like, oh, they, you know, there's people out there that can appear like they have empathy, but do you actually feel it? You know, that's the difference between, you know, an overt narcissist is the type we tend to think of, who's just obviously selfish and arrogant and irritating and appalling, you know. And so they won't ever apologize, you know. And so I would read that about narcissism and think, no, actually this person was really good at apologizing. And so I learned covert narcissists can be really good at apologizing. They can mimic someone who has empathy. They are arrogant, but they show it in ways you don't notice, but it's through their actions, not their words. So as far as the reaction, I knew, you know, I started going to a support group in the town where I was, and I was like, oh, wow, I'm not alone in this. And I started asking people if I could talk to them individually and get their stories. And when I decided to write the book, I ended up interviewing over 100 people because I wanted it to be really accurate, not just about my story. And I've been overwhelmed. At every day I receive emails and, you know, Facebook messages, Instagram messages, just saying this book literally saved my life. And because it's so damaging to our psyche and our self-esteem, but we don't recognize where this is coming from. And we tend to, like, for instance, when I was in this relationship, I was tired all the time. And I had, I would say, like a low level of depression for many, many years. And I just attributed it to, oh, well, you know, maybe it's childhood stuff I haven't really worked through, or maybe it's, you know, because the kids are young and everyone's tired when you have kids, or maybe it's because I haven't found my purpose and I'm not fulfilled. And I'd have, you know, health issues that I couldn't really, you know, find a reason, you know, a cause for. And so that's what happens when you're in these relationships. It's stemming from the person you're living with, but it's not obvious, you know, until later when you start. So I've met incredibly kind people, and that's.
So basically she's saying it's exhausting to be around a covert, well, any kind of a true narcissist. It's very exhausting, draining. I personally have never lived with one. I don't think, thinking back as early as my childhood, I worked with a few, and that is very exhausting to the point where even on my way to my job, I would get nervous or not knowing what I was going to get from that particular person once I walked up into my unit, or what any of us would receive. And it was interesting because we had a code at work. And we were all looking out for each other. So even if we weren't working, we knew the minute our coworker would arrive at work, we wait a few minutes or maybe a half hour, and we would text each other, how's the weather? And that was basically code for how's the narcissist today. And we would either reply cloudy, partly sunny, torrential rain, uh, tsunami, bright and sunny, because we were actually supporting one another, even if we weren't working on that particular day with each other. We would check in, and that was again, you surround yourself with good, supportive, loving people to get through, challenging times like that. So we had our own code system. That particular, and she was a boss. She's no longer there. Um, because of her attitude, but she was there long enough that she did damage to a lot of us. A lot of us. Yeah, yeah, it was a great
The
code,
interesting thing, the
Elizabeth.
people that end up with these type of people are really kind, nurturing, caring, wonderful people. And so I've had the privilege of having really special interactions with people and learning a lot from them too.
And Debbie, while you mention that, do you think that covert narcissists almost pick out people deliberately that are gentle and kind and have lots of emotional intelligence? Do you think that is part of who they look out for in the first place?
Definitely, I think so, because if you're someone, well, okay, there's a chapter in my book called Targets, or some traits of a target, something like that. Traits of targets.
Yeah.
Because there are certain traits that seem to be really common. Not 100%, but the majority of people that end up with covert narcissists are very kind, often very empathic, intuitive. They also, I've found, there's so many people that have said to me, and I felt the same way about myself, how did I not see this? I'm actually a really intuitive person. When someone walks in a room, I can feel how they feel. I can pick up if something's off, and yet I didn't see it, And so there's a lot of self-blame, why was I not smarter? Why, did I let this happen? And that's where we have to give ourselves so much grace and compassion that these people, I've talked to, incredibly smart people. I've talked to therapists. I've talked to coaches, people who are in the field of helping, who have got, suckered in by these people.
Yeah. To jump in, if it's okay, that's how I met Debbie. Is I read her book I devoured it in, I don't even know, a day. And I couldn't put it down, and I wept through it, and it explained so many things about a relationship I was in. But it also, I immediately called my mom and said, you lived through this. You lived through this, and everybody made you crazy, telling you that he's such a great guy, and how can you be this way with this man who's so wonderful and be so angry or hurt or devastated? And she broke down weeping, and I sent the book to her friends. So there's, I think, a generation of women who were, or people, not just women, but people who were unheard and didn't feel safe to talk about what was going on and didn't know. And like Debbie said, made it about themselves, that there was something wrong with them.
So is there a psychological term called cognitive dissonance, where people refuse to accept the reality of the situation and still see their partner or former partner as someone that is kind and gentle, and refuse to see the true and not so kind part of them? It does tell us what cognitive dissonance is.
Oh, is when two things try and exist in your mind at the same time that both seem potentially true. So it's hard to switch your mindset from what you've been most comfortable believing and being taught. So without a strong sense of self, covert narcissists can make you feel like it's all you, and they absolutely use that to make you feel and stay their targets. Their supply is one of the words we call it in psychology.
I just have to ask this question. I know that a lot of
And also a covert narcissist, it's hard to convince or explain to like your friends, like your mutual friends, family members, because the covert narcissist has this persona around other people that they're loving, they're empathetic. So when you go to one of your mutual friends, because once the covert is behind closed doors, say with their partner, um, they're very degrading, and the gaslighting, the typical traits of a narcissist toward their victim. So it's very hard when other people don't see it, um, because they enter a room and they're nice. Can I help you with something? Can I do the dishes? And so other people don't see it. So it's very difficult to reach out to other people and say they're not going to believe me because my partner, he's so, or she is so convincing to other people that they can do no wrong. They help. They're the soccer coach. They help at school functions. Um, they'll help someone else's partner, mow their lawn, and they can't understand, what do you mean he's like this or she's like that? Not at all. So it's very challenging.
people, some people often think, well, narcissism's always there. We all of us have narcissistic traits. It's a word that's flouted around a lot these days. It's just another label. I mean, does it really mean anything? What would you say to that, Robin?
Like I said, it's true that we all only have our own perspective on things, so that by definition makes us narcissistic. We only have our experience to relate to the world with. But the idea of unhealthy narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder always takes place in relationship. So it's people who are trying to get something from other people in a way that's painful or damaging to the other people that they're in relationship with. So it's unhealthy narcissism always involves taking something from somebody else or using somebody else, manipulating somebody else for your own needs.
And that same question.
Right, for your own needs. Okay, so there's the healthy narcissist, because we all have a little narcissism in us, and then there's the healthy one, which is hurting the other person or degrading them or whatever they choose to do to you to benefit their needs, not yours. It's that superiority complex, right? You have to always be inferior. I always have to be superior. And that's not healthy in any relationship. With your friends, your partner, it's not healthy at all.
Question to you, Debbie, then. So is it not just people that are passive aggressive? And what would you say to that if people are quite dismissive of the term covert narcissist? What do you think to that?
Yeah, I think it's become tricky because that word narcissism is thrown around so much very lightly, to mean just someone who takes a lot of selfies, or somebody just thinks of themselves as selfish, basically. And so I think that does a lot of damage to people who have actually experienced a covert narcissist or an overt narcissist, and how damaging it is, because you can, tell your story to someone and they'll be like, oh yeah, I was with someone like that. They were just super selfish. They're super into themselves. And it's so much more than that. That's why I think it's really important to understand, what control looks like, what manipulation looks like, and especially when it comes in a very covert way. I'm usually not a fan of labels, but in this case, it's so helpful to have a label. It was so helpful for me and a lot of people to then see. It helps you make sense of this incredibly confusing relationship.
So, a question for you, Robin. So, if we just take a step back, then, so what actually causes narcissism? So, are people born that way? Is it something that happens when you're a child?
Well, it's that whole nature nurture thing, right? And the answer is it seems to be both. On the spectrum, one of the things when Debbie was talking about empathy, and with covert narcissists, they have an ability to mimic empathy. They now know that there are brain structures that actually don't exist or don't work the same way they do in people who don't have narcissistic personality disorder or psychopathic personality disorder, where they can cognitively display empathy, but they don't feel it. It doesn't show up in their brain. So environment can have something to do with it. They used to say it was parents who were too permissive and gave kids everything, but hard to tease all of that stuff out. It's certainly in today's world, there's much more emphasis on the self than there used to be. And in Western cultures, there's historically been more emphasis on the self. So we may be breeding that as well.
So do you understand that you can't change a narcissist? You can't. They lack empathy or they have none at all. So you can try. They will not change. If it's not there, you can't put something there that doesn't exist. And there's different, they say it can be hereditary, genetic. It's lacking in their brain. So many people are predisposed to it. It might not show up till adulthood. It could show up at childhood. Often something triggers it. Environmental is very much a possibility, but you have to have that part of the brain not there to begin with.
So I just wondered, is there a cure for narcissism? Can people change, or is it once you've been diagnosed, for example, with narcissistic personality disorder, is that it? Is it something you have for life, or are there ways to kind of can people change? Basically, is what I'm saying.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy.
Yeah. I mean,
Here we go.
it's a hard question.
It is. So my general philosophy is, can people change? Yes. But when you have a personality disorder, one of the definitions of a personality disorder is that the way you are feels right to you. And the world is the problem. People outside of you are the problem. So back to the cognitive dissonance. Right? If you feel like you're okay and the rest of the world is the problem, then you have no need to change. So in my years, decades of doing this work, I've never seen anyone with a personality disorder change in a significant way to become someone who I would say, hey, they're cured from their personality disorder. They can change their behaviors in some ways, depending on the depth of malignancy, the depth of the symptoms. So I am kind of passionate about the belief that don't try and change a narcissist, because people get stuck in that belief that, oh, if I could just do this better, more, they'll change. Because they don't.
So I know we've talked about this before, but I just wondered if you could, if anyone listening now thinks obviously we can't diagnose people that are just listening in from this podcast, but I just wondered if people maybe are thinking maybe they are dating a covert narcissist. I mean, I just wondered if there was any particular signs that they might need to look out for. Is there anything that you can say about?
Yeah, so that was my question, because with covert narcissism, right? So what I'm getting from this is it's like that love bombing, right? You don't know you're with a covert until you're already into the relationship, that be it a friend, a partner. So how do you get out? How do you recognize ahead of time, without getting in too deep. And that happened to me once. I actually dated somebody who was perfect to me, perfect. But it took like 4 months, 5 months before I was already involved, not too heavily, but um, I felt he was my quote unquote boyfriend. But by that time, he, 5, 6 months into the relationship, he started showing signs that I can look back and say, yeah, he's a covert narcissist. So this will be interesting.
About that, Debbie or Robin?
Yeah, we can both speak to that, I'm sure, maybe back and forth. The first thing that comes to mind is to really watch if the words match the actions, because it's very easy for us to get caught up in words, I'm so sorry, or, I love you, you're the best, because they're really good at saying beautiful words.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always an excuse for certain things, if they didn't show up at an appointment where they said they would, if they didn't do this, or, show up for a phone call when they, had acted like they wanted to, there's always an excuse. So I would really watch if their actions really reflect, match with their words is a big thing. Yeah. And then also, how do you feel around this person? It's with these kind of people, any covertness, it's like you have to listen beyond your ears. You have to notice beyond just what they're telling you, and also to how your body feels around this person, and also how your self-esteem is. I've noticed with different people in my life, whenever I speak to them, I feel really positive and healthy about myself, like very loving and high self-esteem. And then other people, I'm around them and I can't pinpoint why, but why do I suddenly feel insecure? And why do I suddenly feel like there's so many things wrong with me? So even though, and the more covert they are, and like Robin's saying, there's a spectrum, and you can have someone who has covert traits as well as overt traits. Yeah, and the more covert they are, they will make you believe that you're at fault for so many things, but they won't actually say it. Mm-hmm. So really observe when you're in a relationship with someone, is it feeling like everything's your fault? Mm-hmm. I would say those are some.
So listen to your instincts, because they don't always say straight out, this is your fault. They might give you the silent treatment. I hate that. Because when someone gives you the silent treatment, right, you automatically feel, what did I do? Why aren't you talking to me? What did I do wrong? So when you get those instincts that something isn't right, believe it. Believe it.
I was reacting to, for my experience, one of the things I now know to look for is the very initial love bombing stage, because that was such a powerful hook for me, to have someone who appeared to know everything about me and wants to know everything about me. It was intoxicating to be that intensely known and have someone want to meet all of those hidden needs.
Oh yeah, really interesting what you're saying there, Robin. Just for those of us that don't know, what is love bombing? Can you tell us what that means?
So it's the initial stage when you meet a narcissist where they begin to make themselves, I want to use the word, your savior, the person who is your soulmate and will give you everything you've ever wanted, and professes tremendous love and respect and admiration for you, and wants to be with you all of the time. So it's very much an attachment creating stage where they promise to meet all of your needs. And it is so insidiously hooking, because in the beginning, when you have that, you can't imagine never having that again.
And you talked about the love bombing stage there. I just wondered if there were other stages that people go through in these types of relationships, like, you know, the idealization stage, the devalue, the discard stage. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about the other stages as well.
Sure. Yeah. There's, in a nutshell, 3 stages. First, there's love bombing, and like Robin was saying, it's so powerful, that stage, because it sets you up for the rest of the relationship. You see them under the guise of that first impression, that first love bombing. So the next stage is devaluing, demeaning stage, where, you know, for the first bit of the relationship, they're love bombing you. And then all of a sudden just kind of starts to creep in, not really all of a sudden, but it starts to creep in little acts of devaluing you, demeaning you, mixed with loving acts and kind words. So it's really confusing, this intermittent reinforcement type of thing. And then it always ends with the discard, which sometimes can be initiated by you and sometimes by the covert narcissist, but many times you're the one to end it, because the big thing with a covert narcissist is their reputation and how they look is very important to them. So they won't often end the relationship because they don't want to look like the bad one, the mean one. They want to put you in that, they want you to be in that position. So then they can get the sympathy of everyone else around them. So yeah, those are the 3 stages. And the discard stage, a lot of times a covert will turn more overt. And that's what'll be so shocking, you know, because you've experienced this man or woman who has been so kind and easygoing, and suddenly they're yelling at you and they're swearing at you, and things that you haven't experienced, you know, maybe for a very long time. You've never seen this side of them, and it's really confusing. And instead of giving you those messages, derogatory messages about yourself, they'll say it to your face. You're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. So that's kind of the arc of the relationship. So, and not to be
interesting. And sorry to interrupt, Debbie, but is that because at that stage they become overt because they don't need to be covert anymore, because it's the end of the relationship, you found out who they really are, and that's why they switch between covert to overt?
I think there's a couple of reasons. It'd be interesting what you think of this, Robin, too, why they become more overt. One is from just what I've noticed, one thing that makes this different than other breakups is it's very sudden. When they're done, it's either done with you, and they want it over, they want it done. It's not like a gradual falling apart from each other type of thing. And also, yeah, their mask begins to crack the stronger you get, you know. And so when you start getting strong, when you start seeing their stuff, that really triggers the rage that's been inside them the whole time, and it just comes out. So it just feels like a whole storm of things that happen to cause them to behave that way.
Yeah, I agree that there's I always think of it like a relationship with a narcissist is like a slot machine, and in the beginning you pull the lever and you always get a payout, and then gradually over time that payout gets less and less and less, and when they have nothing more that they want to give to you, that's when the discard phase happens, and that's when the mask is gone because they no longer need anything from.
Fascinating. I wondered if I could ask you, Robin, about obviously we talked about manipulation earlier, and I wanted to talk about coercive control, and there's a term that's often used called gaslighting. I know that The Archers in the UK, a BBC radio programme, featured a big story about gaslighting a few years ago. And obviously we're all talking now in the COVID-19 lockdown, and certainly on a global scale there's been more cases in terms of psychological, emotional and domestic abuse since the COVID-19 lockdown. I just wonder if you could tell us, what is coercive control? What is gaslighting?
That is true. I've heard that since the pandemic, where people have had to stay indoors more, that the abuse from a narcissist has become worse. even without being a narcissist, domestic violence. So that's an interesting point that he's bringing up.
And just tell us a bit about that, Robin.
Well, it's interesting. So the movie Gaslight came out, I think, in 1938. So if you haven't had a chance to
I think it was 1947, but go ahead.
watch this movie, it's now part of the public domain, which is where the term comes from. But it's basically instilling a sense of doubt in a target, in a person, and making them question their own memory, their own judgment, making them feel like they're crazy. So in the movie, if you get a chance to watch it, you'll watch the systematic, it's Ingrid Bergman and Charles Boyer. You'll watch what happens when someone begins to doubt themselves and not trust themselves and lose the strength that Debbie was talking about. And you begin to feel like I must be the problem. So if you notice when you're starting to get exhausted or tired or feel more depressed or anxious around this person, those are key signs that you might have someone who's actually trying to diminish your power and your sense of self. And it may be an abusive situation that sometimes other people can help you see, but learning to trust your own internal sense of this just doesn't feel right.
I've talked to a few people that about the misfortune of being in a relationship with a covert narcissist, but they've also said that they think there are other things going on there in addition to the narcissism. I just wondered how typical that is. Can you have more than one condition? And I know often some people have said that they've confused it with Asperger's or autism. I just wondered if there are any similarities between the two and what your thoughts were around that.
That's an interesting question, because the thing that distinguishes is that narcissists or narcissistic personality disorder people are about themselves and don't want to integrate and be connected with other people. Whereas people with Asperger's, that's all they want, is to be able to fit in and feel comfortable with other people. So while it may look on the surface to be similar personality dynamics, really
There's about 10 more minutes of the podcast. So this is Debbie Mirza, and she's the author of the book, The Covert pertaining to the Covert Narcissist. And I believe she's the first author that ever wrote a book about the Covert Narcissist, their passive aggressive behaviors. And her book is available on Amazon. It also comes up. It's also available on Amazon on audiobooks.
The motivations and intentions and behaviors sort of give that away.
Should you tell a narcissist you think they are a narcissist?
No.
Generally, it's a waste of energy and air trying to convince them of anything. And in fact, one of the things Debbie wrote in her book, which was just so smart, when my mom took my father to therapy, I don't even know, years ago, the only thing that happened in that experience was the therapist educated my father on how to...
Okay, that isn't Debbie talking, so I apologize for that. I don't know who that is talking. But yeah, do not tell a narcissist you think they're a narcissist, because like she said, it's a waste of time. You can't convince them of anything. It is draining. And I would think telling your partner that they're a narcissist would exasperate an already volatile relationship. I think it's just an unnecessary label that they would get. They would just turn around and throw it on you anyway. No, you're the narcissist. Yeah. So I wouldn't say anything.
Better gaslight my mother. So trying to trying to deal with his issues, we'll say, and labeling him as anything only gave him more ammunition to use. What do you think, Debbie?
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, I think whether you tell them they're a narcissist or don't tell them, it's just conversations with them seem to be futile no matter what. And it's just going to anger them. So like she said, it's just a waste of your energy. It really is a terrible experience when you go to therapy with them, like she's saying, because it's like training ground for them, you know, because they're all about, they want to please the therapist. This is like a gold mine for them because they want to appear wonderful to everyone. So now they're learning, oh, okay, I need to do this, this, and this. And that'll work even more.
But you mentioned they're going to therapy as a couple, but I guess, do you think narcissists actually are self-aware? They know that they might have quite a few narcissistic traits, and therefore, you know, and I guess some of them don't want to do anything about it. So the last thing they're going to do is go to a therapy session.
Yeah, they'll go to a therapy session to fix you, with you.
Yeah.
But I've had experiences with narcissists who can self-identify, but I think the covert narcissist is particularly invested in being a humanitarian or being the good guy, and it's not really seen in my experience as a problem. Like, I'm the most generous person, the most powerful person, the most giving person, the most.
So basically, to my understanding, if they go to the therapist, they continue to maintain that superiority, right? Of showing how, like she explained, how good of a person they are. Um, and it's almost like a form of gaslighting to their partner. Because can you imagine what they must say to the therapist? I do this, I do that for her. You know, I help take care of the kids. This is all about her. I don't know what's wrong with her, why she feels this way. You know, it's, yeah, I don't see that as working out very well in the narcissist, you know, couples therapy. I just see it as more gaslighting the victim and the therapist.
Most healing, helpful person out there. So I don't know that I've seen too many covert narcissists come in and say, "Hey, I think might be dealing with something."
Just before we sum up today's podcast, I just wondered if you've been listening to this podcast and you think, actually I might be in a relationship with a covert narcissist, and you're wondering what the next step to do is, obviously other than buying Debbie's book. I just wondered what would you say people should do if they're listening to this and identifying what we've been talking about? I'll ask that to Debbie.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the first step I would say is my book, because that really is so comprehensive and describes all the traits. It gives lots of stories illustrating the traits, so you'll be able to see, you know, if this is what you're dealing with. Also talks about in the workplace, and if you have a parent like this, what that looks like. And there's an extensive chapter on manipulation and control and what that looks like. So I think that would be the perfect place to start. So it'll give you so much information.
Brilliant. How about you, Robin? What would you say to people listening to this that are a little bit concerned about the relationship they're in at the minute and think they might be with someone who's a covert narcissist?
There are so many communities and therapists now who are working with this, because it really was not known widely even a decade ago. So if you suspect, if you put in to Google or go on Facebook, Debbie's Facebook group is a brilliant place to start to test out and see what you resonate with and what you don't, and get some help and support, knowing that you're absolutely not alone in this experience, and then working your way to being stronger within yourself, so that you can leave those kind of relationships and find true love and true happiness.
Absolutely. And what a nice word to finish on, happiness. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. It's been fascinating talking to you both. And this is something I could go on talking to you both for hours and hours. It's so interesting. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to what we've discussed today. Any final thoughts from any of you at this point?
I should also mention I have a YouTube channel that would be a helpful way too for people to, dabble into different topics to help give more information as well. And that's a free resource. And it's just under my name. Yeah.
Brilliant.
And for me, I'd like to say I'm working on a group called Happily Better After, because I actually think that the experience of healing from narcissistic abuse actually transforms you into the person you were meant to be.
Fascinating. Well, thanks again, both of you, and I really appreciate your time. And I hope you stay safe and well during the rest of the year, this difficult year that we're all having. But hopefully, things will be getting better soon. So, yeah, stay safe. Thank you.
Okay, so I just pinned Debbie Mirza's YouTube channel, and what I'll do is after the live stream, I'll put in the description all the links to the podcast, to her YouTube channel, to her book, Debbie Mirza. The name of the podcast is called the Different Minds Podcast Series by John Offord. And there's other topics, time to say goodbye. And this is, it's not all on narcissism. So Jeff's story, adult ADHD, my mental health journey, life with autism and ADHD, neurotypical and neurodivergent relationships. Susan Alderson's 14-year-old daughter became suicidal in 2015 following a period of sustained bullying. Oliver Sacks, who's a neurologist, many different topics. It's a great podcast series. But again, after the live stream, I'll post that all in the description. Does anyone want to grab a link? Dana, are you still here? Dana, how are you, Mrs. Dana? Dana was married back in, I think, was it April? I don't know if she's still here or not. It's been a long time since we've seen Dana. So what'd you guys think? It's really hard, that question, like, how do you deal with a covert narcissist? Like, if you're in a relationship with them, especially if you have children, because they don't change. And they're very manipulative, again, around on the outside to your mutual friends. And when she brought up that movie Gaslight, it's an excellent movie, and I posted that also. And I'll also post that in the description. I believe it was 1947 with Ingrid Bergman. I forget the actor, the lead actor, Angela Lansbury, played a very young Angela Lansbury, played in the movie. But, if you want to come up and share your experience with a covert, or if you have questions, maybe we can figure it out together what the answer is. So difficult to heal yourself because so many memories bubble up and it hurts a lot. Yeah, Christy, I agree. And I think that goes back to the memories of when things were good, the love bombing. Or I have a subscriber who described her relationship with her husband as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And that went on for a long time. So you don't know, day to day, what side of that person will show. It's like walking on eggshells. What's this one? Void, yeah, he's okay. So Void, it sounds like you left your relationship. Let me scroll up. Hey Rosie, how you doing? Here we go. He didn't win because he didn't take my capacity to love and be loved away from me, but it's so manipulative to make you think that looking a certain way was an offense, which was punishable. It's horrible. I remember you telling your story. I do. And that and you're doing much better now, which that's awesome. So I think again, to recognize this and more people, and yeah, narcissism gets thrown around a lot, which is kind of not fair because what do we hear on social media all the time? You're a narcissist. You're a narcissist. I truly believe some people are, but I also believe that some people aren't. But I hear that word, you're a narcissist. If you don't like what someone says or how they act, oh, they're a narcissist. So it's definitely overused, but I think the more that we learn about the traits, the more we can recognize it rather than trying to change their behavior, because that will never happen. And that's scary. And it's almost like I used to think, God, it must suck to be them. But if they don't have the capacity to love or to feel empathy, they're not hurting. Again, it's a power trip. And um, their goal is to feel superior. And that fine line that someone asked earlier, I think Kevin Sabetzi, you did, with a sociopath and a narcissist is the sociopath enjoys, they get a thrill out of inflicting pain onto others. Um, like that sadistic type of behavior. Like that's their goal. That not their goal. Well, part of their goal is they enjoy inflicting pain. Where the narcissist, their main goal is to maintain superiority. If that makes sense. You heard it all the time. You are very ungrateful. Yeah, I'm good, Rosie. I'm good. I'll tell you, social media, it can become very, very draining, especially when you're having to listen, not having to, we choose to listen, right? No one's forcing us to watch particular people, but what involves what we feel is very much a narcissist, it is so damn draining. It sucks the life out of me. I'm watching a friend, ATM, truly believes she will win. I just have to listen. There's no longer any advice that will help. Love those Crocs, Jenny. And two, surround yourself with good people. You know, Rabbit, can you just, do I take a chance? Can you just cam up a little bit in the green room before I bring you up? Only because I've been trolled. Waiting. Yeah, that makes sense. Sociopath has sadism. Yeah. Hey, J May. Narcissist or Rabbit, if it's really you, I just need you to quickly cam up in the green room. Narcissists are always battling for leverage advantage, while sociopaths have already won because you have zero value to begin with, impulse driven. That is true. When it's a true narc, it's emotionally draining and abusive relationship. Yeah, so how do you get out? You know, especially when you have children. Um, and there are people who do stay in these relationships for a long, long, long time, if not forever. And it's sad to me. It's really sad. I imagine that if I was in that situation, it would be a disaster because I would be fighting back. I would be fighting back. It would be so abusive. Hey, Dee Dee, how are you? Rabbit, let me check one thing. Rabbit, is that really you in the green room? Just answer in the chat. I did fight back when I was in that relationship for 23 and a half years. You're right. Yeah, and it can't be healthy for children, you know? Hey, Andrew. I'm going through all this stuff. I'm losing everything. Pretty much lost my son and my career that I used to love so much. And it sucks because they take everything from you, even your sources. I'm so sorry, Andrew. I'm just waiting for Rabbit to answer if that was him, because then I'll check his channel. See if it's the real Rabbit. Okay. Thank you, Rabbit. I'm sorry I had to put you through that. Hello?
Oh, sorry, I just unmuted. I couldn't even remember how to turn my camera on there. Sorry.
That was getting suspicious. I'm like, oh no, not again. Yeah, but thank you. How are you?
I'm good. That was a really interesting podcast. Thanks for playing that.
Yeah, and you know something, if you go to a lot of these podcasts, they encourage you to share, share their podcasts. Um,
Yeah. See, there's a few things well, there's a lot of things to say on narcissism in particular, but I think a lot of us are especially attuned to it
yeah,
because we're interested in true crime. And of course, with true crime, you're observing a lot of narcissistic behavior by definition, right? So that's one interesting thing, just to take note of.
yeah, and it was interesting when they spoke about how narcissism is more in the forefront now. So people are more aware of it. Um, they're learning more about it. So you're seeing a lot more covert narcissists because of that. They're
Yeah,
hiding um, because they don't want to be exposed right away. And that's
yeah,
a little
yeah. And I think that's reflective also by the fact that we've never lived in a more narcissistic culture and society in the West, obviously.
true.
Um, you just need to look around you, really, the way that what social media can give a lot of us. And just like the I think, was it an author that was speaking on that
Mhm.
podcast?
Debbie
Just like,
Mirza. Yeah.
yeah, just like they were saying at the very start, narcissism is not by definition unhealthy necessarily. I mean, we all
Right.
need a certain amount of narcissism just for the sake of self-esteem. And I kind of see problematic narcissism as almost like self-esteem gone haywire. It's like a bug in the system. It's self-esteem on overload, whereby the ability to empathize just becomes unnecessary because someone's supply only comes from what they receive rather than, you know, proper, um, in a proper relationship. It's not all about oneself. It's the joy in others, that kind of shared experience is a healthy aspect of a good relationship, right? But a true
Right.
narcissist would only ever describe themselves as being in love if they feel a certain kind of way. But what they're actually experiencing is how they feel being in that relationship and how it
Mhm.
makes them feel, what it does for them. But true love can only come from true empathy.
Right. Right. So you mentioned earlier that you think narcissism has increased. Do you think though too that it's like she explained earlier that information is more readily available now? Do you think that, I mean, part of me thinks that I don't know if it's necessarily increased, but I think it's always been there, but we just didn't recognize it. So it almost seems like the more we know about NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, we can recognize it easier than, say, we did 10 years ago or 5 years ago or even 2 years ago.
I
Um,
I think I personally would argue that it has increased, precisely because social media has become such a important part in culture itself. And
what a
social
perfect
media,
place. Yeah, what a perfect place for the narcissist to come to social media where it's so easy to maintain this superiority, right?
yeah, I mean, it's very interesting that you covered covert narcissism as opposed to overt narcissism because I think there's less danger of, you know, being in danger of overt narcissism on, say, this platform. Um, but on the other side of the coin, it's far more dangerous in real life because you've got more chance of being in interaction with a covert narcissist, whereby overt narcissism is all over YouTube. We all see it every day on here,
Yeah.
but it's easier to spot, right? So you're less likely to be in danger.
Right, and then we have to really think about, do we involve ourselves with that person at all? Because we've seen on social media, it does spill into our real lives because there are people out there who can only raise the bar so high on social media, right? And they're fighting with people who are saying, "You're not gonna be superior to me," and it's almost like, "Well, I'll show you. Now I'm really gonna show you." Thus, we see people going real life, um, as a way
Yeah,
of saying, I told you so. Now I showed you who I am. I'm superior than you. Don't you ever forget it," type of thing, by reaching into people's real lives. Um,
that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, we are seeing more invasion of people's private life through social media, especially on here, right? You know,
right, it's almost like, you know you are not going to be superior to me. And I'm going to show you, by
Mhm.
going real life. Um, that's their way of control, trying to control you or intimidate you, um, by placing fear in you so they can maintain their superiority. Whereas, again, a sociopath, psychopath hurts you just for the thrill, that's what they enjoy. But where the narcissist is, it's all about maintaining the superiority. And
Yeah.
when you're on social media, how many fights do we see, right? And people are just like, nope, nope, you're not going to get to me. And they keep going and going and going. And then the narcissist might say, well, now I'm going to really show you who's boss, so to say.
Yeah, especially if it's really malignant, a narcissist like that, if they become embroiled in some kind of battle, then they will not accept defeat or not having the last word. And sometimes
Right.
for them, that necessarily comes to the point of threats in terms of their enemies' private lives.
And I think too, when people go real life, say if they are going to call the police, they are putting people in danger. And to me, that is psychopathy. That's almost like
Oh, I mean,
they
yeah,
understand the consequences that someone could be hurt, killed, and
they just
you
don't
know,
give a fuck, right?
you know,
That's true
it goes
psychopathy,
a
or
little bit beyond, narcissism. It's like a psychopath, knowing what the consequences could be, that you could be killed. Um, but yet they do it anyway.
yeah, because the consequences for anyone else is just not part of the program for them. It just doesn't enter their thought process. It can't if they're that level.
Yeah. Dana, the link's pinned to the top. Take a link, Dana. We've missed you. Where have you been? Oh, that's right. You got married.
Yeah, Dana's been living
Congratulations.
her best life.
Yeah.
How have you been, Pink? I've not spoken to you for a while.
Rabbit, when did you, like, before social media, were you aware of narcissism, or when did it first pique your interest, or when you recognized it?
I certainly recognized it prior to being more on social media, but I think, like a lot of people, it's a result of the retrospect of perhaps a relationship where you recall your initial um, what your gut was telling you in the beginning, and then you realize that you were dealing with perhaps a covert narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
But it's certainly become the topic itself has certainly become more heightened, on here on social media, and of course, being interested in true crime. As I say, you see it in almost every case.
Yeah. Right. And then we have to wonder if, are we overusing it? Dana,
Oh my God. Hi, guys. Oh,
hi.
Hey,
It's good
Donna.
to hear your voice.
it's so good to hear your voice. I haven't talked to you guys and I haven't talked to you in so long. So
I
yeah,
know.
I'm looking for headbuds so I can talk better. But
How's life? How's married life?
oh, it's
Wonderful, I'm
really,
sure.
really, yeah, it's really kind of heavenly. It's wonderful. I had
Mm,
to put my dog down the 2 days ago, so I'm really bumming.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
don't
Oh,
worry.
it's so hard. I have my other little dog here with me, but my dog Blondie, she was a yellow lab, and here I'm gonna get emotional. I don't want to get emotional. She was 14 and a half, which is really pretty advanced.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she just started, sort of falling in the backyard, falling just when she'd get up, falling here and there. And since Saturday, she couldn't get up at all. So my son had to, and she's 90 pounds, she's a big gal. And she couldn't. And then we'd bring her to the backyard and lift her and carry her out. And then um, it's just, her body stopped working. And so up until the very end, she was just happy as can be. And we had a doctor come to the house, and really sweet doctor, and it was very peaceful. But she was still like, we gave her peanut butter while it was happening, and she was all excited about the peanut butter. It's kind of a weird,
Oh.
it's screwing with my head. I love her so much.
You had a
So,
vet come to your house?
yeah, they do that. It would have been so difficult. So yeah, you can do that now. I can't find these headbuds. I apologize. I don't
That's
think my
okay.
phone.
I can hear you fine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the vet comes to the house. It's really terrific. It's a little more costly, but to lift her and put her in the car,
Right.
would have been. I think it would have been scary for her at this point too. So, and then they take her. They brought her with them, the vet
Oh.
and it's an assistant. Yeah, yeah.
I guess with lockdown and that became more common, didn't it? I would say.
I think so. It's a really wonderful service. It's very humane, and it seems, I don't know, just more loving. We're all in my living room, and Blondie was on the pillow that she lies on, and my kids and I were, and my new husband, we were just hanging with her, and it's just a very simple process. My head is going into all sorts of, I don't know, just I'm sad. I'm really sad that that she's not. So I brought Winston, my little guy, who really looks up to her, and at the very end he was still licking her face. She has these little tumors on her face, and he was licking those, and right when she was gone, he wouldn't go near her. Isn't
Oh,
that
wow.
interesting? I don't know what that means, but I think it's some kind of instinct,
Yeah.
just something, yeah.
Oh,
So
man, I'm so sorry. It's hard. I mean, a lot of us have had to do that, put our pet down to sleep. I can't. I was a wreck. I was a wreck after for a couple of weeks.
yeah, I think I'm doing that. I think I think my kids are almost better than I am, because, and I think this is the reason, because my two adult kids still lived with her, and they were seeing the decline, each and every day. And even though
Right.
I'm hearing about it, my brain doesn't really, I don't know, I can't grasp what's really, I just don't completely. It's just grief is well, Pink, you've just
I
lost
know.
your mom.
I
Yeah,
know.
it's not something that we can really count on how it's going to play out. Grief is so complex, and it's a real mind fu. So
It is. Like the
yeah.
other day, I've been fine, and then the other day driving home, it just hit me like right from my gut, where I had to pull over. Where it was almost to the point where I was almost hyperventilating, and I'm like, where the hell did this come from? It's and then I had a good cry in my car for about 15 minutes, and then started driving home again, and I was fine.
So all emotions, I've come to realize, and I've probably been saying this on YouTube anyway, but I know I say this with clients all the time. They're like, I don't know why I'm sad. I really shouldn't be sad, whatever it is. I'm like, well, when do you think you chose any emotion? And you choose no emotions. Emotions visit. And they visit for a reason, and they always go back to whence they came. They always do. And it's hard to know that when you're really struggling with a really uncomfortable emotion. But like even joy, I can't say to you, hey, grab a dog right now. I want you to be very joyful. You got it, and go. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that with any emotion. So, you can create a behavior, but you can't create an emotion. You just, as they come, you take them as they come. I think they're information. I think that they're here for a reason to kind of, make sense of the world. And, but they're not chosen. And they're temporary. And that's when they're really sad emotions. It's hard to remember that this too shall pass, but it does.
I think hurtful emotions or negative emotions is one of those things where only time can really heal in a sense, obviously, especially for things like grief, it might never go away, but it becomes
Yeah.
something that you can exist with in time,
I
Yeah,
think you
that's
you
true.
adjust. I think you
Yeah.
adjust.
Some emotions come in like a tidal wave, and they, remember, I don't know if you guys grew up, well, you guys both grew, I don't know, actually, Rabbit Dog, did you grow up near an ocean with big waves?
Not
I did.
far, yeah, not
All
far.
right, yeah. So some waves are just fine. They come in and they splash around, they get your toes wet or maybe your knees, and that's just fine. Like just plain, regular emotions. But some come in and knock the crud out of you and knock you over, and and then it takes you across the Pacific coast or whatever coast you're in. You look up and you can't find your mom on the beach because you're taken across the, whatever. So I think of, like grief and depression and embarrassment and shame as kind of those waves. But
Mm.
they always go back to the ocean. They always do. And you can pick yourself up and go, okay, where am I? And
Yeah.
where's mom? There's mom. I see her red
The
umbrella.
the
So,
cruel thing about it though is when you're underneath one of those waves that you're describing, you somehow can't imagine that wave ever receding, but it always does.
yes, yes. Yes. Hey guys in chat, I'm sorry I'm not responding to you. I see Sour Milk and I saw Dee Dee. And I see a bunch of you who I know, and I really appreciate your friendship and kindness. It means the world to me. So the topic you guys are talking about, narcissism, it's a very fascinating topic. I'd love to hear more what you guys have to say and contribute on any
Well,
level if I could.
we played a podcast that had to do with covert narcissism, which
Yeah,
I find fascinating because where where narcissism is more readily available for information now, people are recognizing it more, researching it more. There are books out on it now that they're saying that even like maybe the malignant narcissism, the overt narcissism, so to say, uh, are now going toward the covert because they feel exposed, perhaps.
sure.
I
Yeah.
find that interesting. It's almost like they don't want to get caught. Um,
I
but
don't think an
covert,
overt I don't think an overt narcissist could be anything other than an overt,
yeah,
to be
that's true.
honest.
That's true.
Unless
So my
unless
take on
they get great
narcissists,
help.
there's some personality disorders, I'm going to say most of them really, that really don't know that they have a personality disorder. So true blue narcissists, not only are they not able to recognize it, they don't typically get help for it because they don't see a problem. They are so grandiose in their thinking. Um, and if they have to go to any kind of therapy, it's usually for a different, something happened. I got to go to therapy, but it's nothing to do with my personality. I'm just fine. And probably this therapist doesn't know what they're talking about. So I'm sort of ahead of the pack here. And furthermore, if they were to be told that they were narcissistic and really given evidence, they wouldn't believe it. There's no work to
Right.
be done on the narcissist end. Yeah.
And another thing, when a narcissist like goes to couples therapy, that has to be mind blowing as a victim, as to
It's
have your
really,
partner in
yeah,
therapy and having them
it happens all the
gaslight
time.
you right in front
Espe-
of a
I,
therapist.
I do it all the time. So we're often a narcissist is married to often, not always, to somebody who's very borderline, which is very painful for actually more painful for somebody who's borderline because they are not willingly, they're not cruel. They're just hurting all over. I heard that in a movie the other day. The expression "I'm hurting all over," and I thought that's true for people with borderline personality disorder. They're always hurting all over, and it's very sad. So they often cling to narcissists. So it's a common love match, or I shouldn't say love. It's a common marital match, and it's doomed. But I do work with them, and it's pretty devastating.
so can two, well, they obviously must be able to because it often happens. So if there's two um, overt narcissists, is it possible for them to exist in a relationship successfully? If
That's a great
hypothetically,
question.
It
if
happens all the time, and no, it's not successful. Oh, just a moment. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. My daughter called. I'll call her right back. She calls 20 times a day. So, it happens all the time. They tend to attract each other in their grandiosity. Initially can be appealing. Their love bombing can initially be appealing, but they are, they end up being lousy to each other, and it's pretty doomed, But people, marriages, some people stick it out, even if it's really a toxic marriage, just based on, I think, I don't really know why. Some people just stay married, even if it's the worst of all marriages.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah.
So you once told me, Dana, because you taught me a lot about narcissism in the mask, and I appreciate that. And do you remember when I said to you that I thought social media was changing people, some
Yes.
particular people? And I was struggling with, like in any relationship, why can't they be the way they used to be when they first came to social
Right.
media, right? It
Yeah.
was love bombing, right? And you said to me, it's not that they've changed, but now you're seeing who they really are.
Yes,
Like,
that's exactly right. They're being revealed. The parts of them
right.
that you didn't see before are being revealed. Absolutely. Yep.
And I was
So on some
blaming
level,
social
yeah.
media, like it's so toxic here, it's making people angry. And you were like, no, you're now seeing, the person for whom they really are now. And
Well,
that
I mean,
really
yeah.
resonated with me.
Well, it's true that, so for all of us, so even if if we aren't narcissists, we tend to show up as our best selves. And usually, with time, we start to show, especially if a relationship develops, we tend to show, even, by the way, this is a healthy thing to do. So, all right, so you and I became friends, Pink, in real life. And so what we can do is say, all right, let me see if I can show Pink this kind of insecure side of myself, for example. I'm not saying that I did that with you, but we do that in relationships because we're going to test a little bit to see, is she still going to be my friend? Because this is something I struggle with. So for a narcissist, or I remember on YouTube, people used to use the expression, well, she's sure showing her true colors. And I thought, well, no, she's showing different colors that you haven't seen before. They've always sort of been here. It's just they're revealing, and sometimes you can't help it. If so, we we call it emotional dysregulation. If you're emotionally dysregulated, which means if you're having a temper tantrum, or you're very upset, or you're very embarrassed, or having a negative emotion, and I've done it. I've done it on YouTube. I've gotten angry at people, and I've shown another side to myself that people are like, really? She's a therapist. She's yelling at Molly Golightly. And I did. Right. So
Or
does that mean
Diane,
that
the launch chair mafia.
does it mean that I'm only an angry person? No, it means that I have to, constantly make sure that I'm not. So if I get angry, that I have to keep a lid on it. It's something I have to be conscientious of. And for other people, whatever their own emotional dysregulation, where does it land? How does it play out for them? Look at patterns of behavior and be mindful of it, so that when that emotion comes, you have a different route than, say, punching somebody in the nose. You say, excuse me, I realize I'd like to punch you in the nose, but I'm going to go take a walk around the block, right? And that helps. So it's DBT in a nutshell.
So because I keep going back to like when a creator first comes on YouTube, their voice is different, right?
Yes.
Soft spoken, and
Yes.
it draws you in, like this person's really nice. And then 5-6 months later,
Yeah.
even the voice has changed, which blows my
Absolutely.
mind. Blows my
Yeah. So
mind.
you're referring to narcissism, and it is covert narcissism. That's not a word or expression we use in the DSM, but it means a lot. I understand that
Really, that's not in the DSM.
just no, there's no covert. It's just there's not narcissism either. there's narcissistic personality disorder.
NPD.
So
Okay.
yeah, narcissistic personality disorder. We don't meet people often with that disorder, but you do see them on television, and you do know some of them in real life, and they're really, really awful to be around. But what they've learned, so they're different than sociopaths, but they have something in common, is they mimic other people. So if, for example, if they hear a sweet voice, they can say, you know what, I can do that, and I can pull people in. It's probably unconscious thoughts. It's not, but hey, that will work. And it does work. People will be more likely to, be attracted to somebody whose voice is soft and who's using friendly words. But when the chips are down, or when it gets tough and bumpy, or when a narcissist actually develops any relationship with somebody, they start to resent that person just on a basic level. And that's really hard to understand, because it's when closeness happens. When actual closeness happens, a narcissist will resent the person who's becoming close to them.
Wow.
And they don't know why, but they themselves don't know why. But it's probably because they were also raised by a narcissist. And so it's echoing behaviors of, say, their mother or father who wasn't really there for him. And we make associations in our brains, like, this feels good, but I don't trust it. I'm really attracted to this. I want to be her friend, or I want to marry this person, but because I have strong feelings, I'm probably going to be hurt by this person. So instead of letting them hurt me first, I'm going to punch first. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think as
Tina,
well?
go ahead,
Sorry.
Rabbit. That's okay. Go ahead, hon.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Dana, do you think in the kind of real world that there's more danger, like if we accept that there is a distinction between covert and overt narcissist? Like, to me, a covert narcissist is maybe just a narcissist that has, or a overt narcissist that has less of an ego, right? So they're a bit more um, under the radar as such, but they have the
Right.
same, they're drawn by the same selfish needs and, a
Yes.
need for aggrandizement. Do you think they're more dangerous than an
Well,
overt narcissist because
sure.
it's easier to detect?
Because they're easier to detect, because the other one is unrecognizable and you fall into their trap. It's
Right.
more appealing if somebody's friendly. We want to be around friendly people. It feels better. And, I had a boyfriend years and years ago. Um, and I knew on some level, Dana, wait a minute. I don't think I knew that there was going to be pain involved, not physical pain, but I had some inkling, and I didn't trust it. And there was a
Uh,
lot of love bombing, and it felt amazing. I felt like, oh gosh, he's writing me poetry, and he keeps showing up to my house unexpected, and it's just so romantic. And it so very
And you
quickly,
want to believe they are who they present themselves to be.
absolutely, because it sounds too good to be true, and it probably is too good to be true. So, you give in, and now your defenses are down, and now they have a chance to be. So now they resent you, and they get to hurt you, and you're sucked in. So you're going to have an argument with them and spend a lot of energy in saying, "Oh, that really hurt. I can't believe you hurt my feelings, and you were so inconsiderate." And you're hoping that they'll return to what you saw before. And the thing of it is, that's the mask. The mask was the love bombing.
Hmm.
The true person is dark and dirty and mean at their
so
core.
at part of the podcast I played, they did talk about that, and they said to go with your instincts, but also, what was it, guys? To line up their actions with their behaviors.
Yes. Yes.
And
Look at
don't
how they
forget
treat
your initial guttural reaction,
people.
because your
Pay
body,
attention to absolutely. Pay attention to how they treat strangers. Just how they treat people walking down the street. Pay attention to how they treat animals and children and people who can do nothing for them. Pay close attention, because it speaks volumes. It really is the truth. The truth is, and we do see it. In the guy I dated, I wanted the fantasy to be true. I wanted a Prince Charming. And even though there was indications that there was something untrue, something at his core that was really lacking. And I came to discover, oh gosh, I was right. But at that point, I was already kind of
Too late.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put down a lot of time and energy and believed that I probably could, show him the way to be a kinder person. That's not true. You can't show, if it's not there, it's not there.
Hmm.
Right. And they also said, like, if your partner says, well, I'll be at that meeting with you, or I'll be at that doctor's appointment with you, and they don't show up. Like, in other words,
Absolutely.
their actions don't match their
The
words.
actions don't match. Right.
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 If it's especially repetitively. I wanted to ask you, Dana, what's the difference between narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder?
Oh, it's extremely different. They share some traits. So the more so narcissistic people and people with antisocial personality disorder, which is what you guys know as psychopath or sociopath, they have more in common. A borderline person who with borderline personality disorder is really hurting all over. They're sort of in chronic panic, and they tend to do more self-harming than they can be harmful. It can drive people crazy, but it tends to be more within, drawn inward than drawn outward. So they often will use lots of substances, dangerous substances, drugs, a lot of alcohol. They can be cutters. You know what that? I hate to use words that might be upsetting,
Right.
but that's self-harm,
So
self-harming.
they more tend to lean toward feeling inferior than superior.
They feel inferior, they feel overwhelmed by uncomfortable emotions, and so they tend to get in really bad relationships, one after another, and they lack a sense of self. They don't have a real sense as to who they'll talk like that. I just don't know who I am. They tend to dissociate, which means kind of like you feel like you're outside of your body, like this isn't really happening. It happens to all of us. So like when my dog was dying, I was like, this doesn't seem real. I really felt like, that feeling where it's just so overwhelming that it doesn't feel like it's really happening. They have that often. They have that experience often, and they'll go into kind of this dissociative state. You might not see it unless you're sort of a therapist or a sibling of somebody with that disorder. They might not show it, but they're not, they're just hurting most of the time, and what they really need. And by the way, they tend to be raised by narcissists. A narcissist will beget a borderline, and it's very sad. I work with them, and I feel really bad for them. But the good news with somebody who has borderline personality disorder is they can really work on. You don't get rid of it. You can't cure it, but you can work on behaviors. You can change, instead of punching a hole in the wall or punching somebody in the nose or cutting, you can color. You get a coloring book. You can dance. You can sing. You can go for a run. So they have to make, I call it a Mary Poppins bag. Like, what's in your Mary Poppins bag for when you're really feeling terrible? What can you do to calm that quiver, to calm it, to comfort yourself? And so they have to be really mindful of what to do instead of doing something harmful. Self-harming it usually is. Sometimes it's hurting other people though. So it's hard to sort of, a lot of times they're like, so I did something terrible to my boyfriend's car. I'm like, oh shoot. Okay, yeah, no, can't do that. So it's stuff like that too.
That's a really handy distinction there between, superiority and inferiority between the
Yes.
two.
Yeah. Well, here's another headbanger. You ready? So the thing about narcissists is although they come across as feeling superior, if you really talk to them, you will discover that at their core, they've always felt completely inferior to everybody. So, as a sort of way of resolving that constant experience, they go in the opposite direction. It's all a facade. So, and they only feel okay if, look at me, I've got this amazing Corvette. Look at me, I've got the most expensive handbag. Look at me. Otherwise, they don't feel that they're okay at all unless they're constantly looking in the mirror and having others look at them too. So it's really about feeling constantly, chronically inferior, that they seek, outside attention.
Do you think Amber Heard has BPD, borderline personality
She
disorder.
Great example.
She probably does.
So-
Britney Spears probably does. Yep.
It's
Lindsay
incredible. It's
Yeah.
I look at
incredible
I
that
never heard as a narcissist, like someone like I don't see her as hurting. She was so
Right. So she's, it's not unusual to have somewhat of both. I'm certainly not making a diagnosis, but I
yeah.
see, and I don't know enough about what's really going on with her. I mean, if we sat down and had a conversation, we would probably discover, similar. So both borderlines and narcissists at their core feel empty and afraid and inferior. So the way they solve it is very, very different. So if you look at Amber Heard, you kind of see a little bit of both. So I really don't know. I mean, I watched the entire trial, but I got a lot of, she comes across as being superior, but if you see a lot of self-destruction, you kind of take a second, gander and say, wait, this seems a little bit more self-harming. So look for self-harming. And they also, people with borderline, this is a key trait. This is how you'll know it. They struggle with negative emotions. We call them uncomfortable emotions. So when they get uncomfortable emotions, they they do something that's self-harming. Sometimes they harm other people's stuff, like she did with what's his name?
oh yeah, Johnny Depp.
Or she took a poop on his bed. I mean, it's kind of like this.
Yeah.
Right.
So
That was a doozy.
yeah, but it's very borderline. That's very like chaotic behavior. And it's bizarre, but it's also in the moment, it's crazy. And you wouldn't see a narcissist do something that's so obviously peculiar necessarily.
I think what I'm hearing in how you're describing this is the other distinction of a lack of self-awareness being key to someone with borderline personality as opposed to narcissistic.
So a certain kind of self-awareness for sure, yes. So narcissists are extremely in tune with how they come across to others. So they want to seem superior. They want to seem constantly, I have the best car, I have the best hairdo, I'm better than you. Even if they don't believe it themselves, that is what they're aiming for all the time. That doesn't go away. A person with borderline, it has nothing to do with comparing me to you. It's more about, oh my God, I'm about to have emotions and they're going to be terrible. And what do I do to stop them? How about I punch you? How about I take heroin? How about I do something that's really crazy, but it's going to wake up my narcissistic mother and she's going to pay attention to me. And this is what it takes.
Yeah. So someone with borderline personality
Are you low?
have more self-awareness, it sounds like. I may have said that the wrong ground actually by mistake.
Hi, babe. Everything okay? Hold on a second. I'm on a YouTube thing. Are you alone? No. Hold on, guys. I'll come right back.
All right. Okay. Well, that was interesting.
Oh, it's just great to pick her brains, She has so much knowledge, through her occupation.
But it's like she said, she doesn't see really narcissists for therapy. They just don't go. They don't think there's anything wrong with them. And I think if they do go to like couples therapy, it's probably just to go, just to continue their game or
Yeah, there would have to be some potential reward for them in doing it, right?
right. Right. Yeah, like we're gonna prove that you're crazy and I'm not.
It was interesting referring to Amber Heard there, and it's also interesting the fact that she is a trained actress, right? But what was incredible was to watch her on the stand and to actually perceive that she had what seemed like such a lack of self-awareness to realize how transparent she was being on the stand, and she was acting what seemed to be acting out what she was trying to communicate, her case. But it was so blatant and so easy to detect, and yet she's an actress, right? She does that for a living. You would naturally assume she'd be good at that, but I think we could all see straight through it.
Right, exactly. She was ridiculous. And again, I don't think she took accountability for anything, which was a key thing that I picked up on. You
I think
know, that's
someone,
yeah.
the only way I can make that compute is that someone like her, and we've all come across people like her on YouTube, is that they, because everyone has to justify their actions in some way, right? So there's people that probably consciously lie, like perhaps Amber Heard was doing, or you hear people doing on YouTube, creators, because they actually believe in that they're right, like they're acting in the greater good. So all these small lies are justified because they believe that they are in the right somehow overall, you know. So I can justify these lies and manipulations because of that. So it's a really subtle thing, but I think it really does happen, and it's the only way that it makes sense to me.
Mm. Yeah, Black Eagle, Dana, her husband came in with company, so she said she'd be back, but you know Dana. She might not. But she was, yeah, it was so nice to have her up here. You're still watching her current antics? Oh, she's still in the news? She keeps really? What's going on with Amber Heard?
Well, she's a perfect example. She cannot, it's impossible for her to not have the last word or to go quietly or accept
Right.
defeat. She has to somehow win in the end. Now, it probably won't look like she's winning to the rest of us, but to her, she has to believe that she's going to win eventually.
I'm just looking up the news with her. Uh, is she in, did they kick her out of the movie Aquaman 2?
I've not followed what's going on with her for a long time, but yeah, that happened back then. I don't know what what's happening currently with her.
Oh, it says Amber Heard to finally be removed. Oh, that's a question from Aquaman 2. Johnny Depp is back in court, but this time to seek damages from Bruce Jackson for accusing him of plagiarism. Jeez. Amber Heard has 16 reasons why she will appeal her sentence in lawsuit against Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp resurfaces and looks unrecognizable in New York.
Oh, really?
Uh, he's wearing sunglasses and a Baker Boy hat now. He just came back from the UK where they toured with his band. Oh, that was a while ago.
Yeah, I think the first thing he did was come over to the UK and go on stage with his band.
Yeah, yeah. He appeared in this year's MTV Video Music Awards in a weird astronaut suit that had a screen for a helmet, and he was without his signature mustache then as well. He's actually dating Joelle Rich non-exclusively, who was also an attorney, but she helped Depp in the trial against the UK news outlet. So he's not dating Camille, which was a rumor going around.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people were thinking he was dating her. They made a cute couple anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, she was great in the trial, wasn't she?
Yeah. Yeah, she made a name for herself. Good for her.
She certainly did.
So does anyone have any questions, or um, did we learn a little bit more about narcissism, covert? Um,
I think we did.
yeah. And what I'll do again in the description, I will put the podcast in there. Her the author's YouTube page. And again, I think if we focus more on recognizing traits rather than thinking that, you know, you can't change a narcissist. You just can't. Amber's out of control. Someone released voice messages today, betrayed her. Oh God. She was exhausting listening to her on the stand.
Yeah. She was
Thanks, Jenny.
she was something else.
Thanks, your main girl. Hope you're doing well. Rabbit, thank you so much for coming up. Dana, she'll probably come back. You won't be here. Thank you, Dana, wherever you are. And thank you, everyone, for coming. I appreciate it. Like I said, you know, just continue to surround yourself with good, loving, and supportive people, especially if you're a victim of a narcissist. It is extremely draining, even to watch a narcissist in action. And like I said, the closest I was to a narcissist, well, the guy I dated, you know, we were friends for a long time. Then we started dating, but that ended within 6 months. I trusted my instinct. I didn't know what it was, but it didn't feel good. You know, showing up without announcing he was coming, even though I told him, can you at least call, you know, before you come? And he didn't respect that. And he did it again, and he did it again. And that I was like, no, this isn't going to go good. For the simple fact he wasn't respecting me for just saying, hey, even if you're down the street, call me. So, and I remember the love bombing at the beginning and the charm. I was so comfortable with him. And other people, when I broke up with him, what blew my mind was other people would say he was such a nice guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was such a nice guy.
Do you think he was more covert then?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. He was such a nice guy, and just trying to explain it, you know, which I didn't go into depth after a while. It was like, this is ridiculous. I just didn't want to see him anymore. And that was that. People were shocked because, like I said, we were friends for a lot longer, probably about a year before we started really became girlfriend and boyfriend. He started showing lack of interest for my daughter, who was young at the time. You know, if a babysitter fell through, well, let's just bring her out to dinner with us. No, we'll just stay here and watch TV because I want to, you know, I just like having next to me. And I was like, no, you got to go. But
Did
yet
you find,
huh?
Did you find yourself consciously making excuses or justifying actions in the beginning?
No. He too had a daughter a couple years older than my daughter. Yet if we had to do something and it was his weekend with her, of course she was with us. So I found it like, okay, so you don't want my daughter around because the babysitter fell through, so we can't go out to eat? Well, I'd rather, you know, I just loved, you know, I'd rather just be with you, and nothing against your daughter. It was getting no. I was like, no. I was starting to put everything together, you know, showing up unannounced. He's still trying to charm me. You know, I just want to stay home with you and cuddle. We can watch a movie. And I'm like, no, like,
Well,
yeah,
it,
it didn't feel good. It wasn't healthy. It didn't feel good.
yeah. Well, at least thankfully, it sounds like you saw the flags quite early, before
Yeah,
it got too damaging.
yeah. And then I had a boss who was, I want to say she was even a psychopath. She enjoyed making her staff cry. She
Mm,
enjoyed it. And then she'd turn around and say, "Why do you hate me so much?" And I'm like, "I never said I hated you." She did it to not just me, but other people.
mm,
And that's when we developed this code. We all pulled together to support one another and would text each other, like, "What's the weather today at work?" And I'd be like,
mm,
"It's a tsunami."
mm.
Like, and then prayers, people would start praying literally. Um,
Wow.
Gaslighting and, being threatened that if I said, "Well, I'm going to go above you and report this because what you're doing is not right," they'll never believe you. They'll never believe you because you're such a liar.
There's nothing worse than when
Oh,
someone like that
yeah.
um, is in a position of power like that, because some people actually do enjoy being a tyrant, you know?
Well, a lot of narcissists are in position of power when it comes to the workforce.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And there are some who are very successful, but they treat those beneath them like crap, like absolute crap. Um, and we could see something was very wrong with her, very wrong with her. Some days, I mean, she'd be love bombing. It was crazy. And it would be relief. It was like, oh, wow, she really does like me and respect me. Maybe she was just having a bad day. But then it continued. There were more bad days and there were more storms and there were sunny days. But
Mm,
I look back and just, um, it was almost like she wanted to make you cry. She enjoyed it.
wow.
So I think recognizing the traits, the signs, symptoms, whatnot, is helpful.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's good for people to be informed because, I mean, some people just lose all their confidence, I think, when they go through something like that, or they certainly can do, people, because like a true narcissist by definition is gaslighting almost the whole time, and then we all know the gaslighting, especially if it's done to someone with, a lack of self-esteem, it can destroy them, they can believe that they are the problem.
Oh
So if
yeah,
someone's informed, then
yeah. Where I started questioning myself, and then I would get together with other coworkers, and I'd say to them, I was just accused of being drunk on the job,
God.
and oh yeah, and then the coworker would say to me, "Oh yeah, she accused me last month of that too."
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, well, if I'm drunk on the job, why don't you call HR? So, we can go through the policy of drug testing or whatever. And she would say, no, there's no need for that. And I'd say, I don't drink.
Hmm.
Like, um, and she'd say, I know what a drink smells like. And then I'd say, I've got to go home. I can't work under this kind of stress and this accusation. Forget it. Never mind. I trust you. I don't think you were drinking. That was my mistake. After you start crying and you're like, this is unbelievable. I'd even say, call the cops. You can't do this, or call HR. No,
Wow.
no, we're not going to go above. It was just crazy, Rabbit. It was crazy.
Hmm.
Um, but finally, she was let go. But HR didn't know half the stuff that went on.
I can
Um,
imagine.
and we were afraid to go above her. because she had control of hiring or firing us, or a lot
Hmm.
of that control. You
Yeah.
know, what was to stop her from going to HR and saying, she did this, she did that, and getting away with it and us losing our jobs.
And someone like that will take great delight in isolating someone.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, bite you cat.
So, yeah, so I'd love to do another live stream in the future. If you guys want that, if this interests you, you can give me suggestions on. Um, I'd love to do one on children who grew up with a narcissistic parent or parents, um, and the effects it has on children. Because I think there's a lot of people out there who have told me that their parent is a narcissist, and there's a lot of trauma in that, a lot of trauma in that, and a lot of guilt and shaming on the child. Um,
And
where
like
there's
Dana was saying, that like narcissistic parents, they are quite commonly the parents of
yeah,
anyone with BPD, right?
yeah, yeah. So you get a narcissistic parent, and the harm they've done to their child, and like Dana said, their child ends up developing BPD. It's a vicious cycle.
And I do see a lot of people saying that very thing in chat, about their parents being particularly narcissistic. It's quite a
Right, and
common
it
thing to see.
saddens me when I hear people say they don't have a good relationship with their parents or their mother or their father. I do. Um, I'm very fortunate. Um, so I want to learn more about it, to help support those who were raised by a narcissistic parent or both parents.
Hmm.
Um, and again, I just think it's part of learning and understanding, and to be more mindful,
Yeah.
and allowing the victims to heal and hopefully seek therapy, and that it's nothing to be ashamed of.
No, not at all. I mean, I think parenting is the number one influence in terms of people's mental health, right?
Yeah,
But it doesn't mean that you can't overcome, a negative experience like that.
right, right. You don't have to keep living in that past. You can move forward, especially with therapy. Um, and I think I listened to a video recently where they talk about that it doesn't, because you're a victim, it doesn't mean you have to be subjected to be thrown in the past all the time, and you
Yeah.
shouldn't. Um, but you also have to take care of that child within, um,
Yeah.
and address it through therapy, and surrounding yourself with with supportive people who've gone through similar experiences, which is part of the healing with anything. That's why we call them support groups, because we've all experienced something, maybe not exactly the same, but maybe similar, where we can
Hmm.
say, hey, I kind of went through that too. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know and you're not alone, absolutely not alone. And I would love to do some research on narcissism on social media.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
That's definitely a big thing. And
yeah. I have found some things on it. I just have to look into it more. Um,
I
but
think that,
that's challenging. Yeah.
I think there's something about social media that does encourage narcissistic behavior. I mean, it
Hmm.
doesn't turn someone from not being a narcissist into being one, but I think it can encourage that. Um, I think that's definitely the case.
Oh, absolutely. And what better place, social media, where, you're rewarded instantly, instantly.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Especially if aggrandizement is one of your, primary methods of having your supply, you can get it there. So
right,
it's
because
definitely
not
going to encourage
only
that.
you may have your enemies, but you also have your supporters, you know, that help keep your ego inflated, that send you money or even the thumbs up, you know. And it's frustrating because you can see, someone who's so horrible. Um, but there are people who just, you're the greatest. And you're just like,
Mm,
huh? Like, I don't get it.
mm.
Um, where does this come from? Where some of these behaviors are accepted.
Yeah.
Um,
Or yeah, and accepted within certain groups. If there's someone that is, somewhat of an influencer on social media and they have their group, it's interesting to see what some people within that group will um, explain away or try and justify, like behaviors that might be obvious to people on the outside as being problematic will be explained away within the group for interesting reasons, for perhaps quite selfish reasons to become closer, higher up the pyramid within that group, you know?
yeah, very interesting. All right, everyone, I'm going to end this live. I don't know if anyone else out there is live, but thank you for coming. Rabbit, thank you so much for coming up.
No, thank you. It was good to chat to you again. It's interesting topic for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it sure is. I learned a lot more than I did. I learned a lot tonight, more than I did going into it. And Dana, if you're listening, thank you so much. Um, and chat, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate every one of you. And we'll see you soon. Okay?
Bye all.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.